Hello, and welcome to the General Assembly Progressive Caucus on Tuesday, the 13th. Today we're going to be talking about immigration and things that we can do or should be doing to protect people in Vermont from what is happening federally and all across the nation. I'm going to let the House Caucus leader make some announcements. We'll do some introductions, and then we'll hear from our advocates who are here.
Okay, thanks so much. So from our leadership meeting this morning, on the House side of things, we expect the BAA, the Budget Adjustment Act, to be on the floor around January 22nd or 23rd. We also expect the Joint Rules Committee to set a crossover date next week. Their meeting is noon on the 23rd, so we should soon know our crossover date. And then finally, there will be a caucus of the whole tomorrow after the floor to vote on Adjutant General.
We're not voting, we're hearing an overview of the process so that members know what to anticipate leading up to the vote.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. My notes were great there. And the House Government Operations Committee will be taking testimony at 1 p.m. from the candidates today.
It's a joint hearing actually with House and Senate Government Operations
Tomorrow.
today.
Today.
At 1 o'clock.
Oh, okay. Which you'll be at.
Yes.
Convenient. So, great. That's all the announcements that I have. So, and I'm Representative Kate Logan from Chittenden 16 District, which serves Burlington's Old North End and downtown Burlington.
Heather Thomas, Executive Director. Great. Hi, I'm Heather.
Oh, we're going around.
Hi, I'm Caroline Gelly. I'm an intern with the UVM Social Work.
I'm Courtney Record, and I'm the House
Paul Schilling, Advocacy Director, ACLU of Vermont.
Julio Thompson, Civil Rights Unit, Attorney General's Office.
Chloe Tomlinson, Representative for Chittenden 21, Winooski.
Tanya Bihovsky, Senator representing the Chittenden Central District, which is most of Burlington, all of Winooski, a little sliver of Colchester, and most of Essex.
Brian Sheena, representative from Burlington, part of the Old North End and most of the East District.
Sam Hartnett, I'm with Action Circles.
And then let's go to our two folks joining us virtually.
Will Lambeck with Migrant Justice.
I couldn't hear, I know who you are, but I couldn't hear you. Was it just quiet?
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Can folks hear me?
I can
Can you say it again, Will?
Will Lambeck with Migrant Justice.
I can hear you, Will.
Yeah, I can hear you. It seems like probably a problem with the speaker in the room.
Yeah.
We'll turn up the volume in the room.
Okay. How you doing, Wilmer?
Good. You sound very loud, actually.
I'll quiet it down.
Say it again.
Will Lambeck with Migrant Justice.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Wilmer, Superintendent of the Winooski School District.
Thanks everyone for being here. Falco, do you want to get us started with?
I was actually going to suggest maybe starting with Will or Wilmer, since what I have to share probably goes a little bit paired more closely with what you were going to be talking about in terms of different legislative initiatives. But I think it'd be great to get from folks who are engaged in more direct service and community work about what they're seeing on the ground, and then I can talk about at least some of the responses in the legislative realm that we've been talking about from the activist side of things, and then we can go from there.
Sounds good.
What's happening already.
I will leave it to the two of you to decide who wants to go first.
I'm happy to kick it off, Wilmer, unless you'd like to. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, members of the caucus, for inviting us to speak with you today. I'll just speak for a few minutes, and then I might drop off. I won't be able to stay the full hour. Yeah, I want to talk just a little bit about the landscape of immigration enforcement in the state of Vermont, and it's quite bleak. It's a sort of unenviable task to try to summarize what's happened in the last year, and to do that in a way that communicates the pain and human suffering that's involved with what's going on. But in statistics, we've seen a 10 to 20-fold increase in the detention of immigrants living and working in Vermont in the past year. Migrant Justice has directly documented and worked with over 100 residents in the state who were detained by ICE and Border Patrol through dozens of enforcement actions throughout 2025. It's important to understand that both of these federal agencies are intimately involved in what they term interior enforcement. It would be a mistake to see Border Patrol's role as just border apprehensions. They're very much implicated in the surveillance, detention, and deportation of Vermonters living and working in this state. We're seeing detentions through worksite raids, probably most the sort of the one that received the most news was at a farm in Berkshire, Vermont, in April of last year, where Border Patrol agents went onto the farm and chased workers through the barns and cornered them in a trailer on the farm housing and arrested 8. We've seen lots of enforcement through traffic stops, both those that are what we would term, Border Patrol and ICE pulling people over for driving while brown, investigating their status and detaining them. These are sort of opportunistic detentions based on racial profiling, like what happened, for example, with Nacho and Haiti in Franklin County in June. And then we see more premeditated, larger scale traffic stop based arrests. Oftentimes, this is Border Patrol tracking the movement of a crew of construction workers over a number of days or weeks before pulling them over and cornering them and conducting mass detentions of those workers. This is not an exhaustive list of their enforcement activities, but it gives sort of a sense. And each of these arrests, this represents a person who will be traumatized for life. It represents a family that is being separated, and it represents a community that is being traumatized. And I'm sure Wilmer will be able to speak more about this, but many of the immigrant families who are being targeted for these detentions are here in the state because they have extensive familial and community networks pre-existing in Vermont that brings them here. And so, each person detained will oftentimes have tens or dozens of family members in the state who are also feeling the impact of being separated from that family member. And it's incredibly bleak. We haven't seen anything like this before. This vastly exceeds the impact of enforcement under the prior Trump administration and other presidents before him. There are things that the state has done to limit the effect, and we should all be very proud of the work that Vermont has done on multiple fronts. The fair and impartial policing policy and the ways that was strengthened in 2024 have largely worked. And if we compare the experience of immigrants in Vermont versus those in New York State and New Hampshire, the neighbors on both sides, the risk that an interaction with law enforcement will result in your immigration detention or deportation is much, much lower in Vermont than it is in neighboring states. We get reports all the time from New Hampshire and New York of police collaboration leading to people's deportations, and that is not happening in Vermont. And there is more that Vermont can and should do, and I'll let Falco speak about that. But we also need to recognize that there are limited levers that we have, and Vermont by itself cannot kick all ICE and Border Patrol agents out of the state, even if there were the political will for that. And so we need to be strategic in what levers we are able to use and how we're able to use them. And as the legislature moves forward this session, we think it's very important to be listening to the experiences of immigrant communities and the organizations that they've created, like Migrant Justice, to really understand on a granular level what the enforcement practices are, and that will indicate what tools Vermont can use as a state to limit their efficacy and create greater protections for immigrants in Vermont. So I'll stop there and happy to answer any questions, or we can go ahead.
A quick question, and maybe you are prepared to answer it, or maybe you're not, but I'm wondering if you have any data around the number of people being held or moved through Vermont that were not necessarily stopped and arrested in Vermont, and if that number is continuing to climb of people who are essentially being trafficked through Vermont.
Yeah. I don't have the most updated numbers, but in 2025 we're looking at over 700 immigration detainees who were held in a Vermont Department of Corrections facility at some point. That the DOC is going to be more transparently publishing those numbers themselves, and the preliminary numbers that we've seen from them track with more or less what community activists have been able to find through their own data tracking. The majority of people who are, as you said, Senator, being essentially trafficked through Vermont are not being detained in the state. They're being detained oftentimes in Massachusetts and other neighboring states, and then they're sent through Vermont Department of Corrections facilities for a week or 10 days before then being usually moved along to another facility. One very important thing to understand when and if you all are seeing data from the Department of Corrections in the future, what their data shows is that quantitatively, there hasn't been a huge shift in the number of what they call immigration detainers, or people who are there as detainees of ICE, or occasionally as detainees of the U.S. Marshal Service for prosecutions referred from ICE. But that data point obscures the basic reality that there has been a huge qualitative shift in who these detainees are. The contract with ICE, of course, precedes the Trump administration. In the past, the vast majority of the people being detained in Vermont facilities via ICE have been people who have been apprehended crossing the border, and they're held at much shorter amounts of time, and are generally being removed by expedited procedures. The vast majority of those currently being detained and over the past year are those who are already living and working in the state and are being detained through interior enforcement. So as microjustice, we oppose all forms of immigration detention, but it is really important that the legislature and the public understand that even if the Department of Corrections isn't showing a huge shift in numbers, who they are detaining at ICE's behest is really different than what has been practices in previous years.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Will? Okay. Thanks, Will. Wilmer, did you want to give us a framework of what you're seeing in Winooski, what you're doing in Winooski?
Sure. There's a lot to say, and I'm happy to, if anybody has any questions, to answer them. But I will say we've had to come up with some protocols for ourselves, knowing that there isn't much of a collective effort to think about the impact of much of what Will was talking about on students and families in local districts. And so in the absence of coordination at the state level, we've had to brainstorm ways in which we can be prepared for some of the worst case scenarios, but also the day-to-day in this environment of intimidation and state-sanctioned hate and harassment on our families. And so a lot of it has been widely publicized, which has caused added stress on the district, only because that carries a lot of hateful and negative reactions from half of the country. The first thing that was publicized about a year ago was our adoption of a sanctuary schools policy, which intentionally uses the word sanctuary against the advice of lawyers and everybody else. We still did that intentionally, and we went from there. So happy to answer any questions, but otherwise I'll just be here and listen.
Yeah, the question I have for you is if there's ways that we at the state level can coordinate and support you better.
I have to be careful on how to answer that question because, first of all, I honestly don't know. We are in a real bad situation nationally and locally as well. And no matter what we do, we're not going to change a lot of the things that are going on because they're designed to not be solvable. They're designed to create chaos and an environment of so much hostility that everybody just wants to leave. Everybody who is not white and has a bunch of other characteristics, but any immigrant really. And so I don't know that there's a way to make things a little better, but there are clearly many ways in which the state can make things worse. And that means being complicit, being also being looking the other way or normalizing a lot of what's going on, or simply accusing the people trying to do the work of being activists, as if that's a bad word, or not being moderate enough or not prudent enough, and all of the things that people who don't actually feel the effects of hate tend to say. And I will say that while I don't have concrete answers to that, to that question, I will say that the least the state could do would be to, one, like I said, not criticize the districts doing something or the people doing something, not attack them, not to join those attacks, but also to listen to what some of the people on the ground are asking for. And maybe not even me as a superintendent, but our teachers, our communities, our students, they have a lot to say. Even if they don't have the answers, they at least can show you the problem in an honest and real way here in Vermont. And I think acting on that data and taking it seriously, even if we are just a minority, our communities are still Vermonters, and it doesn't matter the numbers. What matters is that we have a task as a state, and that is to represent everybody who's here and support them and protect them, especially the children. I'll be happy to speak to specifics, specific proposals, and anything that resembles the work that a district like Winooski has been doing. Obviously, will have our endorsement and support, so we can begin the conversation there.
Ryan, did you also have a question?
Yeah, sort of like a comment and a question. It sounds like this is the worst possible time for the state to be talking about education transformation when our schools are already under attack from the federal level around immigration issues. But and what I'm hearing is like there's not a lot that the state can do besides avoiding being complicit. I'm curious if there's anything that anyone who is our guest today could share about what neighbors can do to help each other right now in the face of what's going on. And I say that being mindful that it's come to my attention that all of these meetings are being surveilled by law enforcement. They call it OSINT, open source intelligence, and in chat groups, recently someone showed me evidence of this because they infiltrated a law enforcement chat group, that they are regularly monitoring every signal channel, everything they can get into right now, and using that to try to, so I say that because this may not be a safe place to even share how neighbors can help each other. But if there's anything that anyone is comfortable sharing about what our neighbors can do for each other in light of this, that I'm wondering if anyone has any ideas. I would say mutual aid is one way to get involved. But I'm curious if anyone on Zoom or present has any ideas about what neighbors can do to look out for each other in the failure of the state.
I can speak on that, and then I'll have to drop. But yeah. Thanks for the question. Micah Justice has been organizing rapid response networks around the state. We've done dozens of trainings, and we should be very proud that as of last count, I think over 1,300 Vermonters have joined a rapid response network in their community to be aware of what ICE and Border Patrol's activities are and do their best to observe and ensure respect for rights and due process. This is an imperfect and limited strategy, but an important one nonetheless. The Education Justice Coalition of Vermont just this morning published an updated toolkit for how districts can organize to follow the lead of Winooski in adopting sanctuary policies and practices in their schools. So there's a lot that can be done, and much of the terrain of battle right now against attacks against immigrant rights is going to be in the courtrooms, in individual hearings, and in the streets as neighbors come together and support one another. There are limited mechanisms that the legislature has, but we want to be clear that there are mechanisms, and Falco will be able to speak about some of those. And so we hope that this will be an ongoing conversation within the legislature. Regarding the rapid response trainings, migrant justice has been asked by the Speaker's office to develop one for legislators. So we're still training that. We're still preparing that, but we hope that we'll be in the State House in the next couple of weeks to provide an adaptive training for legislators. And with that, I have to drop off, but thank you very much to all of you for the invitation.
Is the Senate gonna be part of that too?
I have no idea. I haven't
Okay.
heard anything about it.
Thank you for letting us know about that.
Yeah, thanks. I know we asked for something last year that never came to pass. I can't remember
Yeah.
why, but
You
so
open
I-
the
Just
floor
scheduling, yeah.
I know.
and then schedule the time.
But let's talk, Senator.
Yeah, so I expected, I think the other thing that people might be able to do would be to donate to the Vermont Legal Defense Fund. And, you know, one of the things we've seen with some of the more high profile cases is lots of people showing up to sort of bring attention. And I think the more we can engage in showing up for people, even if it's not as high profile, is really important.
So you're saying that neighbors showing up to show support for our neighbors who are getting embroiled in these court processes is a way neighbors can help, just
Yes.
being there, being witnesses,
Yes,
not turning away from it.
yes.
Okay.
And bringing attention to it, bringing attention to what's happening, you know, for every, like, there have been some pretty high profile cases, you know, Rumaza Oster, Mosin Madawi, and all eyes were on it. But for every Mosin Madawi, there's 100 people who don't have eyes on that need their neighbors to show up for them.
Where would be a good place to post all of those hearings so that we can mobilize like our community members and our neighbors actually going to the court?
That's a really good question. I mean, they're all available in various court calendars, but that's difficult to find.
Right.
So I think that's probably a good conversation for us to continue having, thinking about that.
Because I assume like different Brunswick gets different populations.
Yep.
That do care more.
Yeah, there's different venues for that. I don't think we have a centralized database of any sort. I mean, Migrant Justice, they've been doing a great job of tracking this and letting folks know when there's opportunities to show up. And just to Brian's question, I'm gonna plug them, plug the Immigrant Legal Defense Fund, also plug the Vermont Silent Assistance Project if people are thinking about, you know, putting their dollars to work as opposed to their time. But also the volunteer opportunities with all those. But those are some of the organizations we've been working closely with at the ACLU and great on ground work, direct service work. And we think folks, they're definitely great folks to support and really appreciate their efforts. And so I'm happy to kind of follow up and dive in a little bit more around specifically things that we think the legislature should and could and should consider in the following year, specifically aimed at the issues related to immigration and the state of policing we find ourselves in with federal immigration enforcement. And so just a little bit of context, I'm Caucus. I'm with the American Civil Liberties Union of Vermont. We're one of 53 nationwide affiliates of the American Civil Liberties Union. There's a couple states that have multiple affiliates. To answer that question, why there's more than 50, we also have an affiliate in Puerto Rico. And so that's why we know that there, I think California has at least two chapters, yes. I think there's a chapter in Puerto Rico and at least 3 affiliates in California. I might not have that exactly right, but that's why it's more than 50. So as part of this response to the Trump administration, coming in last year, we anticipated that this would be happening. We have concerns about basically any administration coming in. We sued the Biden administration, the Obama administration, and sued the Trump administration. Their concerns around how they've been doing immigration enforcement, but had particular concerns about how we anticipated the Trump administration trying to effectuate their campaign of mass deportation. And unfortunately, many of those worst fears have come to pass at this point in time. We've been seeing coming out of Minnesota is really horrific and pretty shocking, and is a really disturbing portrait of what happens when law enforcement is acting without any real forms of accountability. So when we look at what we can do as a state, there's a number of things, and we're trying to think about this almost on a continuum, from before an interaction with immigration enforcement, through the interaction itself, and then through detention, and then into the court processes and legal representation. So we've put out our, thank you all, and legislators, we've gotten our welcome letter, and I think some of you might have gotten some of our communications from constituents who found our slate of bills that we've been working on. And we've been working on these in conjunction very closely with both Vermont Asylum Assistance Project and Migrant Justice, and trying to develop them. So I'll give you an idea of some of the bills that are in play, and then I think Senator Butlerstein can also help supplement. You know, in terms of, looking at the continuum, one of the things that we are concerned about both here in Vermont and nationally, and have seen movement on, is trying to protect what is sometimes referred to as sensitive locations. And this comes from previous guidance that said there was not going to be immigration enforcement in sensitive community locations such as schools, hospitals, places of worship, other things like that. I know right now down in Senate Judiciary, the S-209 is up for consideration. We'll be testifying on that tomorrow, which looks to expand our courthouse arrest prohibition to other spaces. And so that looking at how we can best protect those types of spaces is something we're very interested in. As with many of these things, these are somewhat untested constitutional waters in terms of the interaction between the supremacy clause and a number of other constitutional questions that come into play. But at a high level, the state of Vermont does have an interest in protecting the functions of our state government, and has general police powers which can apply to the operation of all law enforcement officers within the state. So to that end, we support expanding some of those protections. And then also, we've been talking with folks at the Human Rights Commission, and we hope that the state can work with them to have them publish a guidance for folks within the private sector to give them an understanding of what rights they do have and how to best enforce them as a belt and suspenders approach to trying to help protect a number of those locations. So we'll talk a little bit more in depth about where some of the, where we're on the most solid legal ground and where it becomes a little bit more questionable as we try and expand those protections. And I think we're only really concerned there making sure that we're not giving folks a sense of false hope when we're saying that arrests can't happen in this areas or these are prohibited. But that is one thing that the state can do, is to expand those protections, and we're glad to see that moving within the first week of the legislature. Another thing that is of grave concern, that's probably the issue I've heard the most from folks about, is concerns about law enforcement identification and masking. This is another area where we've seen action from a number of other states, and S-208 is also up Senate Judiciary tomorrow, which is a bill that we support, and is something that, as you look at the landscape, we believe the state has the right and the ability to regulate when law enforcement must be properly identified when conducting their operations, with some reasonable exceptions for situations that might be necessary for them to conduct their activities. And I think the masking is a great concern, but at the same time, we also have been through a conversation about the need for masks in certain situations. I think from our perspective, one of the greatest concerns is the lack of proper identification. When you have law enforcement officers engaging in activities where you don't know what agency they're representing, you don't know who they are, don't know their badge number, things like that. And as we saw in Minneapolis, that can be essential in terms of being able to have folks be able to hold folks accountable when their rights are violated. So that is another thing that we are supporting this session. We also want to see some improvements in terms of detention conditions. So as folks have heard, ICE detainees are held within Vermont facilities, and one of the main justifications for that is that the conditions here in Vermont are better than what they might be seeing in other places. And we have not called for an end to that contract at this point in time, mostly because it does allow greater access to legal representation through groups like Vermont Asylum Assistance Project and others, so that if folks are from Vermont, and as you heard from Will, none of the folks being detained are Vermont, folks who are living here in Vermont, and allows them to stay closer to home, have access to those supports. But at the same time, if we are going to be housing folks here in Vermont, we do need to do more to improve conditions, specifically access to language services, access to medical services, and we're going to be testifying in-house corrections about that tomorrow afternoon along with the Vermont Asylum Assistance Project. But at a high level, access to medical and language services are a concern and something that we should address, as well as, addressing overall some of the exploitative conditions that exist within our prisons, such as the cost to be able to communicate with loved ones outside, or the cost to get basic needs in commissary. So we are supporting the legislation that introduced around that. I think H294 is Representative Hedrick's bill that tries to address that in wage conditions. So once again, that applies to everyone who's incarcerated in the state of Vermont, but it is a concern, and the language and medical access issues are especially concerning with the high rate of turnover, folks coming in, the language needs, and we're seeing those not met in many areas.
Has the access to legal services improved at all since last year? I know this was a conversation with the judiciary a lot, sort of as things were early on in the game and trying to get that set up in a more strategic and regular way. Has that improved?
I think there's been, I wouldn't want to speak too much to that. I think that's something we might want to get a little more information from that Vermont Asylum Assistance Project. I know they're on a retreat, staff retreat.
Which is why they didn't come back to me to be here.
Right, so they're coming off of that to testify tomorrow. I think they can speak to some of the access issues they have had. My general understanding is at some points it's been better than others. There's been some inconsistencies, but I can't speak too pointedly to some of those concerns. But I think there's room for improvement in terms of being able to have information about who is detained and ability to access and consistency there. But at the same, and at a higher level, one of the pieces of legislation we're hoping to see move this year, and is something that could have a real impact, would be guaranteeing access to representation for folks who are detained for immigration purposes. And so, as folks may know, if you are, as we've all heard the Miranda warning when folks are arrested, you have a right to an attorney. If you do not have one, we will provide for you. That is for criminal cases. That same right does not exist.
Some criminal cases.
It does not exist in the same way for civil cases. And so what we are asking the state to do is to support the creation of, or the right to counsel for folks who are detained for civil immigration purposes. This is a bill that we should be seeing introduced soon. Representative Leonora Dodge has been working on this with us and BAP. This will be done in two ways, either through expanding services through the Defender General's office or through contracting with organizations like that who do that type of representation. We've seen programs like this in other states, such as like Colorado, Massachusetts, a number of other places. But once again, it's a funding ask, and we know that that is tight, but that is something that we could do this year to help improve the experience of folks who have been brought up into the system and are being detained, make sure that they can get access to legal services as they work through the detention process.
Does that have a number?
It does not have a number at this point in time. We've been going back and forth with Legend Council, but I expect that to be introduced quite soon. One final thing that I think I want to mention, and this is something that's been emerging, we don't have a bill number on this, but I've been talking with some of the folks, some of the chairs of judiciaries and other things, folks like that, and talk to other members of judiciary committees about, is an emerging idea to help get at some of the concerns around enforcement when there is civil rights violations. That we think the state could do and should consider is what folks refer to as a Converse 1983 statute. In its simplest terms, this would mean that folks would have the right to sue federal officials when they violate the federal constitution. This would be done through a statute that mirrors what the liability that exists for state and local officials now through Section 1983. But also expand that as a state right of action to federal officials as well. Similar statutes exist in Maine and Massachusetts, one's been introduced in New York. I don't have the list of all the other states that have these things on the books, but as we're seeing the actions from federal officials that violate constitutional rights and what appears to be an unwillingness to enforce people's rights through the criminal system, or other systems, we think this is something the state should consider as a way to help ensure folks do, their rights are protected if there are federal constitutional violations. And just to be clear, to do this, the state would need to extend this, this liability to all law enforcement officers, but the idea is that most of this liability already exists for state and local officials. It does not exist for the same way for federal officials. And there's a lot of hurdles currently through the Federal Courts Claims Acts and other acts that make it harder to enforce those rights against federal officials. So that's something that we hope that the state would consider. And that's kind of the slate of different immigration proposals that we know are out there, but I think there might be others as well as folks bring them forward. But those are some of the ones that we've been working with folks on and trying to lift up as places where we see the state having the ability to do something and things that could have
Questions for Falco? I just want to add a couple other bills that I've got moving in the Senate. So I do have S209, we do have S208. We are hearing that there is I don't know if it's exactly what you're talking about, but we should connect because in S209, there is the ability, we do include the ability to bring civil action against anyone who violates, including federal people. So we may need to rewrite that to do this.
or it might be somewhere, it might be slightly different. We can
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. But I also have S227, which was introduced last week, and it is actually a bill that I worked with Wilmer on and does take the Winooski school policy to protect immigrant students and generalizes where it needs to generalize, but expands it to a mandate for all schools. And that was introduced last week, and it was referred to Senate Education. I tried to get it written in such a way that it might come to Senate Judiciary, but there was no way to do it. So I want to thank Wilmer for the really great work you've done in Winooski and for helping me try to protect all of our students across the state. We also, this bill doesn't have a number yet, but I am introducing a bill that would prohibit state agencies from collecting immigration data. What we heard a lot last year was that if ICE asks for that data, we have to give it to them. So my genius plan over the fall and summer was to just not have the data. So it does have a caveat because I was not able to poll every state agency to find out if there was any state agency that might actually need that data to provide services. So there is a little carve out that if that information is in fact needed to provide services, but I have since spoken to a healthcare advocate who doesn't think it would impact any of their services. So that's another one that's coming forward from the Senate side that I can think of. Like I said, it doesn't have a bill number yet. And then another bill that I actually introduced last year and have introduced, I think, every year that I've been in this building that historically hasn't really had an immigration context for me, but a larger justice context was a bill around secondary traffic stop enforcement. And the impetus for that was limiting engagement with police. So this sort of spills over for me now to have a larger context, and that is hanging on the wall in judiciary. I think there is a House companion to it.
Not at this, there
I'm
was.
introducing.
Oh, you have it.
Yeah,
Great.
it's gonna be short form, but it should
Okay.
come out.
Great.
Yeah, perfect.
And I'm gonna try to argue for it.
Oh, see, we wanted it in judiciary on our side and not transportation. So it's S144. And the sort of impetus behind that is that any non-public safety traffic stop would no longer be something you could pull someone over for. You would certainly give them a ticket if you pulled them over for, going 90 and a 30. But traffic stops are the most dangerous interactions for police officers and dangerous interactions for just trying to mitigate danger here. So that's sort of what is top of my mind. It's possible that I too am missing stuff. I might be missing some of my own bills. But that's kind of what is happening and lay of the land. So I recognize we have like 6 minutes before everyone has to be in committee. So happy to take final thoughts, questions, etc. from anyone.
I want to thank everyone. I need 5 minutes before I can go to the committee. I can't just go from one room to the other, so I'm leaving now. But thank you for making time in the middle of a busy school day and for coming in here during lunchtime. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
What are grassroots mobilization plans around these priorities? I'm curious how we can be part of a coordinated response.
Yeah.
advocate for these changes?
Yeah, we've been working pretty closely with individual chapters across the state since this is a priority for a number of them, as well as folks Bird Act Network. We've been working closely with VPERG. They've identified immigration enforcement concerns as a priority of theirs. So working with them to identify a number of opportunities. We're planning a press conference to announce some of these priorities and get folks into the building a week from today. So 12:30 on the 20th, we'll be having folks coming to the building to speak to that. We're also, ACLU is planning lobby day on February 20th. We're going to be inviting folks into the building, but also going to be doing our best to keep generating a number of contacts throughout the session, which is a lot of, as our role within this coalition is largely focused on what can we do in the building. It's kind of traditional ACLU role, but I know, for instance, this last weekend, there was Ice Out for Good mobilizations happening across the state. Thousands of people were out in the streets. So we're doing our best to both try and help direct energy into places that it's useful, and also take the lead of communities in terms of what they want to be doing, how they want to show up. And it's been great to see some of the distributed organizing that's been happening. And as we've been trying to tap into the networks, let them know about opportunities, and then also let them take the lead where that feels appropriate in their communities. And then also I just want to invite legislators. We're having a reception, ACLU Rights and Rights reception on the 20th, Wednesday the 28th in the evening here in the State House, where we're going to speak a little bit more about this and looking up to some of your colleagues, and we'll see you there.
And thanks to ACLU for dedicating your resources.
Hello?
Hello?
Did you say something? I'm sorry, I was distracted.
No, I didn't. I was about to ask if you had anything to add before we wrap up and break off the meeting.
No, I'm good. Thank you. Sorry about
Thank
that.
you. It's okay. Thank you for joining us in the middle of a very busy, I'm sure, school day.
Thank you for inviting me. Call me if you need anything.
Will do. Same.
Bye.